We are very excited on a Friday. It feels like Fridays with Rebecca is when I know I'm having a good week and we get to share her wisdom and spirit. We're excited to bring you essentially a part two. We had a webinar last week as well with her. And in this case, we are talking about trauma-informed supervision and resilience. So my name is Christina Clayton. I am one of the co-directors here at the Northwest MHTTC. We want to start first, though, with our land and labor acknowledgement. We know this is a virtual space, but we still want to acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land where the University of Washington sits. I am personally in West Seattle, so in the Seattle area. And we mention this land acknowledgement because we know there have been stewards of this land since time immemorial, and lands were forcibly taken. And we want to acknowledge our history and remember that and always work for justice in these communities. So that's really important why we bring that up. We'll put a link in the chat if you want to know the stewards of your land. We're also adding now something that I've seen a little bit of, which is a labor acknowledgement. And so, like many institutions, our university benefits from the unaddressed legacy of stolen labor and slavery, which is at the foundation of a lot of our society. And we just want to acknowledge that many people are still suffering from those practices today and similar practices and exploitation. And we want to just again, call attention to that and acknowledge that and hope that we can work towards a more just labor in our society. So this webinar is being recorded. Slides will be made available and certificates of attendance will be available. And we'll go over some logistics in just a moment. A little bit about our network. I lied. We've added this slide. It's the last day of Pride month. And so we're very excited to be part of this. And our whole network has been celebrating and sharing a lot of events. And so we'll put a link. Most of these have been recorded. So if people want to see more and hear more about these topics, we're celebrating the last legs here of Pride month. But we don't forget about it once June is over, of course. For our network, we are a nationwide network that started in late 2018. We're in our fifth year, and we are supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. And we have 10 regional centers and a National American Indian Alaska Native Center and a National Hispanic and Latino Center and a network coordinating office. And the same structure is the same for the network on addiction and for substance use prevention. So we support resource development, dissemination, training, and technical assistance. And we are here representing Region 10, but it's a webinar, so anybody can join from wherever. A little bit more about our Northwest MHTTC. We are sited at the University of Washington, as mentioned, in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And so our goals are the same as the network, which is to support skill development, heighten awareness, foster alliances, and most importantly, probably today, is offer free publicly available training in TA. And so our area of focus for the network is evidence-based practices for psychosis, but we train on a lot of things, and we really focus on EDI and provider well-being and supervision and integrated care. And we also have a really sizable school mental health supplement. So we're excited to be with you here. We do things through live and recorded webinars, podcasts. Rebecca and I just recorded another one of those. We have virtual learning communities, online courses. So if you aren't getting our newsletters or training announcements, we'll put a link in the chat how to do that. I just sped right through a bunch of stuff. Apologies. Today, we always share this slide with our network. We just want to acknowledge that depending on the topic, we know people have, always various perspectives and experiences, and just always want to be respectful in our events and appreciate your non-judgmental inclusivity of all the different perspectives we might have in our events. Few things about logistics. So you are muted, you're off camera, it's a webinar. And so though there are 160 people here, we'll have to be communicating through other means. It is recorded. Closed captioning is available if you would like. We will get you slides and video on a product page that we'll share in an email, and you can get a certificate of attendance. We don't have formal CEs, but we can offer you that. And for communicating with our team, today we have Peyton, who's in the background, and he is diligently getting everything in chat because I don't know what's in there now. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I will be mostly sort of facilitating the Q&A, and so we'll be doing that near the end. And so if you can please put your questions, if they're content related, for Rebecca in the Q&A, and we'll get to those near the end. And if there's something for our team, please put it in the chat. If you just want to say hello or greet or respond to something, feel free to do that. We really are reliant on your feedback. And so there's a confidential, anonymous way to do this survey. It takes about 2 minutes. And so we'll be putting that in a little bit before we end. And if you have to leave early, we'll put that in as well. But please use whatever personal code they ask for. Just use whatever numbers and letters you want. It's a one-time event. What's mostly crucial is to hear how you liked it, or if you had feedback that you didn't like it. SAMHSA does not obviously know the details of all of our material, but they do support our training, and your participation in the survey helps keep the free training coming. So appreciate that. Now to the good stuff. Rebecca Demerol is the founder of Trauma Integration Programs, providing training and support to social services personnel, medical and educational professionals, emergency services teams, and corporate organizations for more than 20 years. Her background includes 14 years as a BC ambulance paramedic, 22 years as a paramedic trainer, and over 2 decades as a registered clinical counselor, specializing in post-traumatic stress and loss. She is a licensed East Asian medicine practitioner and acupuncturist, generating another depth of understanding to her counseling work. Rebecca's unique skill set also and experience is informed by her own traumatic childhood and teen years spent on the streets and in the foster care system. So that gives her special familiarity and empathy for trauma and loss. Rebecca continues to be an active volunteer and advocate for people who are unhoused in her community and beyond. And so thank you, Rebecca, for being here today. And just want to welcome you and let folks know we are hoping, and I think probably, let's see, hopefully Peyton has put in the chat, probably, I couldn't scroll through all those right now, but we're hoping that instead of the chat, if you can, do this mentee.com and enter this code, and that way it'll show up on the slide. So I think if I click on the slide, perhaps something will show up.
Yeah, people are getting in there. I see.
Oh, good. Yeah, excellent. There we go. Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, we always see tired or exhausted.
I know.
And,
Friday. So Friday.
Yeah. Yes.
Ready, exhausted. Mine is hovering. We'll talk about that in a sec. I love this word cloud when it starts to sort of form with different things.
Yeah. So you can use the QR code, or if chat is easier, that's fine too.
So far, I just see ready and exhausted, which
I know. Yeah.
It's kind of like,
there are plenty more on the website. It's just not refreshing on Zoom right now, but I can read some off if that helps.
Oh, shoot. Oh, there they go.
There we go.
whoa.
Oh my gosh. It's, it's always a little interweb delay. So
Excited for Friday. The Friday feeling: content, relaxed, anxious, ecstatic, optimistic, anxious about the 4th. Grateful, intrigued, ready, peaceful, happy, thoughtful, grounded, accomplished. Achy, sick, sad, compassionate. I'm turning my head this way and that.
Oh no.
So it is. Okay.
My apologies. Got a little wild with the scroll wheel. It's just real excited today.
Last week somebody put cute, which I made me laugh, right?
Yeah.
So if anyone's feeling cute, like if you wake up and you're feeling cute already, it's got to be a good day, right?
All right. Well, I'm going to go off camera. You let us know when you want me to advance and stop sharing. But if you're ready to go, Rebecca,
I think I'm ready to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
I feel like
well, thanks everyone. We'll be
Yeah.
here in the background if you need us. And please don't forget, if you think of questions, put them in as you're thinking of them, and we'll get to those at the end. Thank you, Rebecca.
Awesome. So, hi, everybody. Really good to see you. I'm going to start with my own territorial acknowledgement. I live in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, and I moved back here from Seattle, where I lived for 8 years. I moved back here 5 years ago. And I have to say that living in Seattle was a super rich experience. And even though I'm Canadian, and also I'm a US citizen as well. And I miss a lot of the people there now that I'm here. So my territorial acknowledgement is that I'm occupying some of the unceded land of the Coast Salish Lekwungen speaking people who've been sustained body, mind, and spirit through their relationship with this land for thousands of years. I hear and heed the call to learn more about my colonial history, the ongoing impacts of my privilege, and to be part of the challenging work of reconciliation. So welcome today. We're going to be talking about leadership and resilience, and yes, and how we make decisions, how we find a way to feel good about the decisions that we make. That the more the higher up in leadership you are, the more people that you have to attend to with your leadership, the more challenging it can be to make decisions. And we're talking about today doing this from a trauma-informed perspective, which just means that we're widening the window. That's what a trauma-informed perspective is. It's just a broadening of looking at things. So yes, we have to broaden our perspective so that we can see the big picture, but we also need to have a micro perspective so that we're paying attention to the individuals and the smaller details that we're dealing with. So we're looking inward, reflecting on what we find, and trying to always look after ourselves and do that self-care, which enables us to come from a stronger, more grounded, more integrated place. So I'm going to share my screen, show you some pretty slides, and we'll be taking some questions later on. And so if you are watching the slides, just keep track of any questions that you might have. And here we go. Right there. All right. So this is wisdom to know the difference for supervisors and leaders. And I chose this phrase because it's from the Serenity Prayer. And how do we know? How do we have the wisdom to know the difference? How do we know the difference between what feels like the right decision, what feels like the not so great decision, and is there something in between that we can depend on? So we're going to apply a trauma-informed lens to decision making and look at integrating our head, heart, and gut for knowing what to do, and looking at and recognizing and acknowledging our personal decision-making patterns as they are now, as they've been in the past, as we'd like to project into the future, working on cultivating and that self-evaluation to honestly always be looking at ourselves and deciding what is best to do from there, and defining and applying this broader perspective I was talking about, widening that window. And that again is in trauma-informed work. We're not just asking, say, what is wrong with somebody or what is wrong with this situation, but what happened here and how did things get the way they are, and how did people get the way they are. So if you've done any of my presentations before, you will know that I always like to provide some self-care. And this is the one that I love is to, I say to always keep this in your back pocket. And this is a breathing exercise for our vagus nerve. It's great to do anytime throughout your day. And I encourage you to always do self-care throughout your day. It's great for waking up in the morning when we have that highest cortisol level. That's that stress endorphin. So that comes up in the morning. So if we wake up feeling anxious, do a few rounds of this breathing, it helps. and anytime that you're feeling that you need a little extra support. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It impacts our breathing and our face, our throat, our lungs, all of our visceral organs. And so I'll be talking more about the vagus nerve in upcoming presentations. But I want to encourage you just to get where you're at in your seat, feel your seat on the chair. If your feet can be on the floor, that's all the better. And just feel what parts of your body are touching the chair. So we get this real somatic sense of being where we're at. You can close your eyes if you like for this. We're just going to be doing this breathing exercise through our nose rather than having our mouth open. Just keep the mouth closed and breathe through the nose. We're going to breathe in for 6, hold for 1, and then exhale a little bit longer for those 8 counts, which gets the vagus nerve communicating with the part of our nervous system that says, you know what, it's okay, just rest and digest. Okay. So let's do a few rounds of this together. So breathing in for 6 counts, hold for 1, and out for 8. Do a couple more. I feel like maybe one more. Thanks for doing that with me. Keep that one in your back pocket, share it with your friends and family, share it with your coworkers and your clients. So one of the books in the resources that I've offered is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. And it's a great book. It's a great book on neuroscience. He is a neuroscientist, and he talks about neuroscience research showing the only way we can change the way we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience. It always comes back to that, learning to befriend what's going on inside. So that's some of the language that used when we talk about polyvagal theory, befriending our nervous systems, getting used to noticing what's going on. And I like to say that awareness is where we find our agency, where we can, instead of operating from sort of an automatic place, we can operate from more of a place of choice when we have this awareness, and that's what gives us our agency. So I'm here to tell you, leaders, that you already have what you need to be great leaders. You may have been thrown into this position of leadership that you're in. You may have come up through the ranks, so to speak, wherever you're working. You already lead in your life and many different things. If you are a parent, you are leading with your family. You are leading in many, many different ways. So yes, we're talking specifically about the workplace here, but also let's just keep broadening our window and knowing that the way we lead, the way we operate in our lives outside of work is also reflected in how we operate when we're on the job. So just, thinking about what kind of strengths you draw on to lead and what's difficult and what's easy. So later on this month and into August, I'm going to be doing a learning community, and we're going to be talking much more about what kind of things we draw on to lead. And it'll be more of an interactive, more intimate thing. Some things are difficult, some things are easy for sure. And there's another thing to think about, and that may be reflected in how you're leading, is does it feel like it's burdensome? Does it feel like the position that you're in to look after people, to have all these plates spinning at work, does it feel like a burden, or does it feel like an honor, or does it feel like different on different days, depending on what's on your plate? So it's good to ask ourselves, how do we actually feel about our role as a supervisor? What's coming out? What's emitting from us when we're at work? Does it show up that we feel like we're burdened or that we're resentful in this role that we're in? Do we feel like we've got too much going on? Are we forgetting that we're also part of a team and not just maybe in leadership, but that we can also ask other people to help, that we can be vulnerable and say, yeah, this feels like a little much right now. Can you help me? And this comes back to the body, mind, and spirit. What does my body feel? What's the somatics of what's going on with how I perceive my position as a leader? How do you feel when you have to direct somebody at work? What's that like for you? I love this because all these decision-making styles, I've done them all, I do them all. And so just I invite you to kind of lighten up and look at this list and see which of these are more common for you. You know, are you doing the knee-jerk thing when you have to make a decision? Are you doing the F you, I'm so fed up and I don't really care? Are you doing the kind of backpedaling, oops, I'm sorry, never mind? Or you're trying to please everybody and do everything the right way, which is like, you know, keeping all those plates spinning, and it's very stressful. My way or the highway, we put our foot down, we draw a line in the sand. Sometimes that's necessary, yeah. I'll teach you a lesson, the punitive kind of decision-making styles that you hope they'll learn from, right? The sanctimonious sage, that I'm going to come from a place that makes it look like I really got it together when I may not feel that way. Or the balanced present human, you know, all of these except maybe the balanced present human, all of these ones before that are coming from really a trauma place, probably a sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response. And that doesn't work so well. We get a lot of examples of that from our political figures and from many of our people that are in leadership. And it's not the best way to operate. It doesn't work so well. There's a lot that's not working. So we get to observe which of these things that we're doing most and how that feels in our body, and then how it's settling with the rest of the people that we're working with. So how do we know what to do? How do we know whether to rappel down that cliff or whether to stand at the top and look for another way down? How do we make that decision? Where does our decision making come from? I got some ideas about that. So the first is, and you know, I feel like if I'm speeding along, it's just because there is a lot to unpack here, but I'm also aware that when I get to this slide, it always makes me notice that, okay, it's all right. It's all right, Rebecca, just slow down a little bit. I take a little drink of water here. And yeah, and encourage you to do the same and just kind of feel your body and keep doing that 618 breathing as we're sitting here enjoying this presentation. So our head and our intellect and these decisions that we make from our minds is very useful. Of course, we need good brains to be able to make these good calculated decisions. And our intellect is kind of our outward face that we show to the world. It's how we sort of show what we know, but it can overrule other ways, other more subtle ways of knowing. It sometimes can be the authority. And because we come from a society where the head and intellect is so valued, sometimes the head and intellect gets to be the boss and overrule those other more subtle parts like our heart, our emotions, our gut, our actual instincts. So it's most helpful, as all of our knowing is, when it's integrated, when it's blended, when it's part and parcel and connected to the other ways that we know. And I know from my experience in life that I have relied a lot on my heart and my feelings. And that has carried me along quite well. It's also got me in trouble through love relationships that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And that's what I'm supposed to do because I've not been grounded in my intellect. I've not been grounded in also my gut instincts. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. But just coming from our heart can it can be great in some kinds of situations, but it can also be messy. So again, we want to connect it to the guts. We want to connect it also to the intellect and have those things integrated together. Now, our gut instincts, this is our deepest sense of knowing, our real, it's when something tells us, and literally in our guts, something we can feel it somatically, we can feel it right in our bodies, in our guts. When I talk with clients and I'm saying to them, well, how do you know that? Where do you feel that in their bodies? They almost always just touch their abdomens. So the thing about our gut and survival instincts is they can be damaged by trauma and abuse. And so if we're trying to depend only on our guts, and we've suffered a lot of trauma and abuse in our lives, and that prefrontal cortex in our brains, which is responsible for our executive decision-making processes, the ways that we regulate emotions and have clarity of thought, those things get damaged by trauma. And so then we're forced to only run on our guts. And that doesn't work so well either, because then we may not be making those clear decisions by using our emotions and using our intellect as well. So this little picture here is a picture of the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve starts at the base of our brains, and it connects with our ears and our nose and mouth and throats and our lungs and all of our digestive systems. And I wanted to draw your attention to this gut and brain connection. It's called the enteric brain. And the enteric brain has more than 100 million neurotransmitters. And here's something that I only learned recently, that serotonin, one of those feel-good endorphins that's produced in our body, most of it is produced in our guts. In fact, 95% of our serotonin is produced in our small intestine, which is amazing, right? Which is part of the reason why, yes, we feel so deeply in our guts, and that ailments like Crohn's disease and any kind of digestive issue is very much connected to trauma. It's very much connected to that psycho-neuro immunology that Gabor Mate, for instance, talks about, and Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about in The Body Keeps the Score. So yes, digestive disturbances are related to what we think and feel. Stress increases our gut issues. Gut disturbances send signals back to our brain, so we get this loop going on. So this is why, Bessel van der Kolk, he talks about the top down, bottom up, that changing our thinking and realizing what's going on with our thoughts and becoming aware, and things like mindfulness meditation, where we get to observe thoughts floating through, and the working with the body, working with breathing exercises, working with exercise, working with things like yoga and qigong, therapies like acupuncture. All these things can help our bodies de-stress and integrate our trauma. And Mary Oliver, I just threw this in because Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets. And she says, integration makes us whole, and humans are complicated, and we can feel fragmented until we learn how to accept and integrate who we are. So this word integration, which I say all the time, just means to take all the parts and turn them into something else. And I'll often use the analogy of baking a cake. So you got flour and you got butter and sugar and eggs and all that. And all those ingredients are not a cake until we blend them together. And then we actually have to put those ingredients in the oven. We actually have to bake them and process them in a way that things come out as whole, so that we become more whole as human beings. And that if we are feeling without paying attention to it, then it's really not integrated. So attention without feeling is just only a report. So if we're only reporting what we're feeling without actually having that sensitivity to ourselves, then We're not integrating. I want to do this little meditation with you. And sometimes people feel when I do these things, well, here's, you know what? Here's what I fear, that sometimes people think I'm woo-woo. So what? I'm woo-woo. So this is a 3-center meditation that comes from my grounding in East Asian medicine. And all this is going to do is have a way of using our bodies to bring the awareness to the different parts of us. So regardless of whether you feel cynical about this, I just hope that you can embrace it and have fun with it. So if you like, you can close your eyes and I will talk you through this. So again, feel your body, feel your seat in your chair, and just breathe slowly and see if you can allow your breathing to just drop into your abdomen. So we're going to take our dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use my right hand. And I'm going to just start waving my hand towards the top of my head and bringing more energy into my mind, bringing energy into that center of my head and my brain and my mind. I'm just breathing, kind of enjoying it. We can think of this as Qigong, and Qigong just means energy work. Qi is energy and Gong means work. And now do this and wave your hand towards your heart, where we consider this to be the center of our emotions. And just breathing and enjoying that and noticing if this changes anything. So I really feel something as I'm drawing energy into my heart. I'm feeling you all doing this. And then I like to use both my hands for the next one and drawing energy into my guts. Where does this deep energy come from? How do I know things? So this is a way we can care for ourselves. Another beautiful thing that you can do during your day if you're just feeling like a little imbalanced. So I know just having done this and talked through it, it helped me too. So I hope that it was something fun and interesting for you. So our knowing gets damaged in many ways, and especially when we're really young. And excuse me, if we've suffered emotional abuse, if we've been gaslighted. So for instance, we know and we feel and we experience that something has happened and somebody tells us that didn't happen. I didn't say that. You didn't see that. You imagined that. So this happens in many people who are victims of any kind of abuse and trauma. Sexual trauma especially can damage our knowing because we, especially when it happens when we're young, but certainly anytime this happens, we sort of have to dissociate. We have to separate ourselves from what's too painful in our bodies. And that can, when we separate ourselves and divide ourselves that way, it disconnects us from some of our knowing. The racial, gender, cultural violence, all of these kinds of violence damage our knowing because it's just too painful to experience. So sometimes we shut down and we lose touch with our ability to be sensitive to what we know. When we feel our voices aren't heard, when our hopes are crushed over and over again and we have insufficient support. And by the way, this crushed hope is where our cynicism comes from. It's where that voice in us comes from that says, yeah, things aren't going to get better. Nobody's going to help me. I don't have any support. And nothing's ever going to change. So this kind of cynicism really comes from our hopes being crushed. And again, when we become aware of this, when we can just say, yeah, I feel like my hope has been crushed. I feel cynical. When we can actually just admit to that instead of trying to cover it up with busyness or anything else that we do, that's where our healing starts to come from. Feeling is the gateway. Acknowledging, allowing our feelings, and that's what starts to tap into our deepest instincts. It's also one of the scariest places to go. So this is where we really need support. This is where having a good professional, if you can, or just a good friend that you can bounce things off of. As leaders too, we need to have peers that are also leaders that we can express, what's difficult for us and what's challenging and what's easy and what's hopeful, and so that we're not isolated. So it's very important to have a peer or somebody to speak to, so that you can offload some of these feelings and acknowledge them. And this is where insight is gathered from, when we start to face our fears, when we start to bring out what's going on inside of us, when we start to befriend our nervous system and start to acknowledge that, yeah, I felt like I was coming from a place of just fight or flight. I felt really scared. I felt like I had to run. I felt really pressured. And that's where those decisions that are from that fight or flight response come from. And that's really not from an integrated place. But you know what? We're not perfect. We see that, we acknowledge that, and it starts to change right away when we put light on it, when we shine light on what's difficult. Gabor Mate, if you haven't read or seen any of what he does, wonderful trauma expert, doctor, Canadian guy. He says, trauma informs us. The essence of trauma is disconnection from ourselves. Trauma is not the terrible things that happen from the other side. Those things are traumatic, yes, but the trauma is that very separation from the body and emotions. It's not the what happened to us, it's what we did with it. It's the beliefs that we formed around what happened to us. That's those belief systems that we project on the whole world. And all of a sudden that just becomes our reality. So when we start to notice that, when we start to notice that, yeah, that's my belief. When I said earlier there that, oh, I think that people are going to think that I'm woo-woo. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's part of my fear. And as soon as I said that, I felt better about it. I felt like, yeah, it's okay. So it's okay to feel certain ways. And the more that we express that, and the more that we connect it to the experiences that we've had, and notice how those beliefs were formed, then that's where our clarity comes from. Gabor's new book, The Myth of Normal, is wonderful. He was here in Victoria doing a talk at University of Victoria. And it was funny, my husband and I went, we watched him do the talk, and I know him personally. He wrote the foreword for my book. And anyway, so he's up there, big crowd. He's like a rock star. He comes in and everybody's on their feet. It's like Mick Jagger's entered the room. And then he gives his talk, and it's wonderful. And then he has to sit down and sign a zillion books afterwards. So he's sitting there just doggedly. And if you ever met Gabor or seen him talk, he always looks tired, and he just has this beautiful, wise face. But he looked exhausted. He just came back from Budapest. So he's sitting there signing book. And my husband and I, thought we'd pop over and just sort of wave to him while he was signing. So we popped over and we said, "Hey, Gabor," and he looked up and his whole face just kind of lit up like, oh, there's people that know me. And we said, "Hi, how you doing?" He said, "Was I okay tonight?" We just had to laugh. He said, "Yes, you were great." And so it just goes to show you that even somebody with all the accolades and all this wisdom that Gabor, he still wanted somebody just to connect with him in a way to make him feel safe and acknowledged. So yeah, the vulnerability is beautiful. And to see that in somebody in a leadership position is also beautiful, and reminds us we can be vulnerable too. Because it's summer, because it's finally sunny out there and we can take our shoes off and walk in the grass, I want to remind you that this is a good thing to do for grounding, for feeling your body and feeling the earth that we live on and feeling the ground beneath us. So I want to encourage you to, take off your shoes, go for a walk, and feel the earth beneath your feet. If you can do that today, Maybe you're working downtown somewhere and it feels like you just got pavement all around you. I bet you can probably find a little piece of grass somewhere, and make sure that there's nothing that you don't want to step on there. But, just take off your shoes and sit on a bench and put your feet on the ground. Even if there's no grass, just put your feet on the ground for a moment and feel the earth beneath your feet. It really, really helps. So as far as decisions go, we have a lot of practice in being unsure, being not knowing, being uncertain. And we may have a lot of practice about being certain about something, but maybe not feeling really good about it. Really, and body, mind, and spirit, check it out in your body. How do I feel when I've made this decision? How does yes or no feel in your body? So this is something I'll often do with clients too. What does yes feel like? When you think, let's practice something here together right now. So when you think of something that you really love, try to find a yes, like I just love sunny days and going swimming. That I can put my bathing suit on, go in the water. And when I think about that, there's this big yes. And I got my hand on my chest because I just totally feel it in my chest. I just feel this kind of fluttering. When I think of like my cat, I love my cat. My cat loves me. And, maybe you have a dog, a baby, a good friend, a lover, somebody that you really care about. Again, that yes can come up in you, that kind of fluttering, like, oh yeah, I feel this integration of this body, mind, and spirit. There's just a yes everywhere in my body. So yeah, notice that and start to practice getting in touch with that. And then what does no feel like? What is, don't traumatize yourself with a no, but what is I'm sorry, I like sushi, but I do not like wasabi. So, right. So if I think about wasabi, no, it's a definite no. And I feel it in my body and it goes boom, right here. I feel it down in my gut. It actually goes across my pelvic bones and just goes right into my belly button. So I feel that no in my body. I also feel it in my shoulders. They kind of turn in a little bit. I feel tight in my mouth, maybe in my eyes too. So when I say practice yes and no, it's just getting that somatic sense in our bodies of starting to know, how does my body respond to when something feels like it's yes, it's right, I got it, or no, it doesn't feel right. Or what's the in-between? I'm really curious about the in-between places too. So we have either side of the continuum here, but what's in the middle? What's I don't know feel like? And is I don't know okay? And does I don't know mean I need a little bit more time? Or can you help me with this? Or can I reflect this off of you? Or can I bring more people in to help me make this decision so that we can make it collectively? Do I need more information, right? So all of this plays into our ability to be good leaders at making these clear decisions. So here's some ways, and you might know these already, and you might be doing these already, and they may seem really basic, but I'm here to just kind of bring you back to the basics because you already have what you need. You already know all of this, but when we're making a decision, often we take a deep breath because our nervous systems are literally telling us that's what's needed. That vagus nerve is calling on us to breathe and take a nice long exhale so that our vagus nerve can help connect us with our parasympathetic nervous system, which tells us to rest and digest and gets us really grounded and out of the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system drive. So do breathe first. Take your time. Some decisions may have to be quick. Yeah, so even if you can take a breath, that's giving yourself a little bit of time. Or maybe you've got all afternoon, or maybe you've got days, weeks, or months, or even years to make a decision. But take whatever time you need until you can feel as best you can what the decision is calling for. Writing it down, the old pros and cons list, great way to to look at what's the right decision to make. Here's an important one. Is the decision that we are called upon to make in alignment with our values? Is it in alignment with values of others? Is it in alignment with values of the culture of my workplace, of the greater culture, of the world? You know, what are my values connected to? Who or what is impacted by my decision? Again, we don't have this really well modeled by people that are in political power, for instance. Decisions get unilaterally made, which do poorly impact others, and they may be only for a special interest group, and it's not taking into account the larger context of humanity. So looking at who or what is impacted and talking it out, taking our time to speak with others, especially finding peers that we can work with, but also working with the people that we're in charge of supervising, and asking them for their opinions, asking them for feedback on our leadership and decisions that we may need to make and how they might be impacted specifically. Plan it, breathe, get grounded, rinse and repeat, and do all these steps. And you'll find if you remember to do many of these steps, it's going to help your decision making. Oh, here's a big one. When we're leaders, it's terrifying to be wrong, because what is wrong anyways? Right? Good question. So what is wrong? What is making a bad decision, and why is it so scary to us? Why do we feel like we need to be right at all costs? We see this with our political figures. We see them backpedaling and never taking responsibility for a decision that they've made. Very seldom do we see somebody in big power apologize and say, yeah, that wasn't a good decision. I made a mistake. And you know what? There is a lot of value and wealth in and being vulnerable and saying when we think that we've made a mistake or come from a place that didn't honor our values or take into consideration other people. So here's my question for you. How do you react when things don't work out the way you thought they would? I know for myself, I worry what other people think. I worry what how that will impact my future employment and my future decisions, my future connections with people. I worry that I'll be judged. I worry that I'll be isolated. All that comes up when I worry about making a wrong decision. And so that's what I'm asking you, is just to check in and see, well, what happens when you think you might be making a wrong decision, or you might have made a wrong decision in the past. Why do we feel safe, in quotations, when we are right? So what comes up for us when we feel like we've made a good decision, and why do we feel like we need to be right at all costs? Where do we learn these ways of thinking? Well, I'm telling you, they come from our trauma. When we're scared of making a bad decision, when we're scared of being punished for somehow not doing the right thing, then that impacts our decision-making process. And that is exactly where it came from, is our traumatic backgrounds and the decisions made there, the choices that we made there, the ways, the belief systems that we formed there, and how that's impacting us presently. As leaders, we need to be able to change our minds. We need to be able to say, yeah, you know what? You know, when we were doing this last time and I was saying that this is the only way to do it, or this is the best way to do it, I've been thinking about this, and you can give me some feedback on this, but I'm thinking that maybe we could try it a different way. What do you think about that? Right? So this kind of collaborative way of including others in our decision making, of acknowledging that something in us has changed, something has pivoted, is actually a strength and not a weakness. This is where creativity actually comes from. So again, I just want to get you to check in and ask, is it okay if you change your mind about something? How does that feel? Where does that register in your body if you realize that, yeah, that's not what I thought it was. That opinion, that judgment I had about somebody or myself or that situation, I think it's different now. How does that feel? What happens in your mind, in your body, when you want to do or say something different? And you may even notice that other people, that brings up something, that brings up fear or judgment in other people when you go to change your mind. So how do you feel when you think that somebody else might be judging you, or when they even express that they have judgment about you because you've changed your mind? It's all big stuff, and it's stuff that can feel burdensome when we're leaders, when we when this is all kind of in our face. But there's a lot of growth and wealth in this, and this is part of the beauty of being leaders. Is we get to learn a lot. We get to be in this big arena of learning about ourselves as we model our behavior to other people. Brene Brown's another great leader, and she trying's messy, right? And this is one thing I love that she says, that trying is messy, and it's exactly what I was just talking about, that changing our mind, yeah, it can seem really messy, and it may not come off as really nice and clean and clear and collaborative. It might just be like, well, I made a mistake. Let's start over here. And that is where vulnerability comes in. She says, vulnerability is not knowing victory or knowing defeat. It's understanding the necessity of both. It's engaging. It's being all in. It's being vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable and willing to make mistakes and willing to change our minds and willing to fall on our faces. And that's what makes us great leaders. When we're watching the Olympics and we see somebody running and they fall and they get up again, isn't that moving? I mean, isn't that what really stirs us? That, yeah, that person, they got up and they kept running and they finished the race. So we're inspiring others actually when we're stumbling along and making mistakes and changing our minds and doing it in a way that's authentic and with some grace, with some braveness behind us. Sometimes the bravest and most important thing you can do is just show up and fall on your face and get up again. I know I've done that a million times. Okay. How are we all doing? Look at this beautiful baby with his big nostrils. We're going to do an alternate nostril breathing. It's actually a yogic thing. And it's a wonderful little self-care thing you can do anytime you're taking a break at work. Good to do if you're going to the washroom and you just want to take an extra, 30 seconds in there doing this. It doesn't take long to do. So I'm going to walk you through it. And again, we just start by sitting quietly and feeling our bodies, feeling our seat or rear end in the chair, wherever you're sitting, feet on the floor, feeling the rest of your body as it connects with wherever you're sitting. And we're going to use our thumb and our baby finger, and we're going to breathe through our nose and alternate. It's called alternate nostril breathing. This is wonderful for if you have a headache. It's wonderful if you're just trying to balance that, what we call yin and yang in Chinese medicine, or the right and left sides of the brain. We're balancing those sides of the brain and helping our whole breathing system as we do this alternate nostril breathing. Very ancient yogic technique. Okay, so we're going to start by closing our right nostril with our thumb and inhaling through our left nostril. So I'll get you to do that. And then use your pinky to close your left nostril and exhale through your right. Nice and easy. And then inhale through the right. Close it with your thumb. Exhale through the left. Inhale through the left. Close it with your pinky. Exhale through the right. Let's do one more. Inhale through the right. Close it with your thumb. Exhale through the left. So when you do this, if you feel like dizzy or lightheaded, you were probably working a little bit too hard. This is like a super, super gentle thing. It's also a great way of gauging. Maybe you are like just a little bit too, through your day. So if you do this and you're getting dizzy, you're probably working too hard at it. So it's just a really good little check-in to see if you are just pushing a little hard. So like meditating, this, and this is a type of, active meditation, it should be the most gentle, soft thing that you do in your day. I like to start my day by sitting quietly with my eyes closed and just simply breathing, noticing my breathing, and trying not to change anything. It's not trying to change anything. It's different than trying not to, right? Not trying to change anything. Just noticing. And when we do these kinds of exercises and we have this kind of noticing and we're being gentle with ourselves, it starts to change something in our nervous system. We get a little bit more used to operating in that way. And that starts to reverberate and change something in that whole fight or flight response that may be running the show. And it starts to back that off a little bit and allow our parasympathetic nervous system to run the show more. A little drink of water here. So, do we feel confident? Do we feel confident in what we're doing with our work? Where does our confidence come from? Where do you feel it in your body? Who told you you could or you couldn't do things in life? All good questions. And these are the kind of questions in the learning community, which will be a smaller number of people. And I'll be much less slides and more interaction. We'll have a meeting format and I'll be on the screen and going into breakout rooms. This is coming up later this month and into August. And we'll be asking these kinds of questions. When do I feel confident? What does confidence feel like? Is this when my head, heart, and gut are integrated, when they're all working together? How does that feel in my body? How familiar is that feeling? Have I felt that before? And what was that connected to? What kind of decisions was that connected to? And again, back to our early childhoods, was there somebody that told us that we could do something or we couldn't do something? We're always right, we're always wrong. You're never going to be anything. You can be anything you want. What kind of messages did you get when you were young? And how are these impacting your leadership now and your ability to make decisions and your confidence in yourself? Okay. And so as Maya Angelou would say, we just do the best we can until we know better. And then when we know better, we can do better. And our knowing comes from being connected to ourselves, befriending our nervous systems, knowing when we're coming from just our head, when we're coming just from our emotions, when we're just operating on the fight or flight of our guts, and that's all that's happening, or whether it's a combination of those things that are working together and giving us that clarity of thought and that clarity of action, and that taking into account of how this is impacting others and whether this is coming from an authentic place in ourselves that's in alignment with our values. So that's the end of what I want to say with the slides today. I believe there's going to be some questions that Christina is going to give to me. So I'm just going to stop my share here and come back to you. And I welcome your questions and thank you for listening. Hi, Christina.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. Yeah, you were with us on Fridays for so much during the pandemic. It feels like old times to have some of those breathing exercises and reminders. Yeah, I'm really, really happily surprised to see, over 200 people here on a Friday morning, which we know is a very busy day often for people, end of the week. So we do have one question, and I want to encourage anybody to throw in more into the Q&A if you have them. One person asked, if trauma can inform us, if we control it, can we use it? So I don't know what you'd say to that.
So if trauma can inform us, can we control the trauma? Is that the question?
If trauma can inform us, if we control it, can we use it? I think it's probably just how you read the sentence. So I apologize. So I think it can inform us, and can we use its power for good? I guess is how I'm reading that question. If we're able to, sounds like process it and other things to maybe you'll get it.
So here's my question. Thank you for this. Is that if we think about the most resilient, strong people that we know, people that really model resilience to us, and then we think about what's happened to those people, you can kind of draw a parallel. I know for me, when I think of the people that I know have had the most challenge in my life, those are usually the most resilient people. So I really equate that we don't get resilient without challenge. We don't get resilient without actual trauma happening to us. And when we integrate it, when we start to realize what has happened to me, what has been the impact on me, to my beliefs about myself and myself in the world and the world around me, and what I think about people and how I think people are judging me, how I judge other people. When we start to sort of unpack all that and knowing that it's a result of what's happened to us, that's where our resilience and wisdom comes from. So that's how trauma can be used. That's how we really can, I don't want to say make lemonade out of lemons, but I just said it, didn't I? But that we can really squeeze the richness from the difficulties that happen to us and realize the resilience that's available to us when we integrate that trauma.
Thank you. I just posed a question to the audience, and I don't know if anyone is feeling up for answering. People are saying a lot of really nice things. Oh, there's a couple more questions, but I would be curious, how has this information today, and this is for the audience, how they might view supervision or might do supervision in the future. Again, please feel free to write that in the webinar survey when you give us your feedback, but we do have a couple more questions now in the Q&A. So someone asked, how do we provide leadership in the way we know best when we are being told to do things and to direct in ways we would not independently choose to do when we are working within a system that is broken? And that's, I think, unfortunately, a common experience. So how do we do it in terrible circumstances, I guess?
Yeah. All I can say is do the best you can. And it can take real bravery to check in with what feels right for us, and then to actually find a way to question that authority. to find a way to collaborate and question authority. I mean, this is what we do when we write to our Congress, when we write to our council people. This is, we engage instead of disengage. And so we don't have to feel victimized by what we may need to implement, which doesn't feel right to us. We can say no. We can find different ways. We can question that authority. We can engage other peers to collaborate with us so that it's not just our voice. And this is the real challenge. This is the challenge of the world that we're living in, is to keep standing up and being that voice. Yeah. And I know you're all doing that too. So yeah, don't lose hope. Keep going, yeah. And take care of yourselves.
Okay, more questions coming in. The next one, for reactive supervisors, what steps can they take to help them respond versus react? Having a reactive supervisor turns into a stressful work environment. So I'm guessing this person is experiencing perhaps a reactive supervisor. I will also say, and you and I talked about this earlier on the podcast portion, is that can be a product of being in a supervisory role and being overwhelmed and all the things you described, coming from a different place of knowing or reacting. So yeah, I think that's a very common theme.
Yeah.
Can happen to all of us, but how do we help supervisors, and ourselves as supervisors, respond versus react?
Compassion with ourselves, finding a way to understand through drawing a parallel, seeing that, say, if we have a reactive supervisor, why might they be reactive? Well, they got all the plates spinning and everything. So, and they're, we come from our trauma response when we feel stressed. We come from that fight or flight, and that often comes out as ways that are, really reactive and may not be sensitive to other people. So when we're compassionate, first of all, to ourselves, if we're feeling impacted by that, and we can take care of ourselves with breathing and with just taking time out and finding peers or professionals to speak to, and then maybe even finding a way, when we've given that compassion to ourselves, to find a way to give that compassion back to the leader who's being reactive to us, and saying, finding a way to see if we can help, and to empathize. That's part of our compassion too. So when we empathize with ourselves and we empathize with even leadership, and saying, wow, that couldn't have been easy. And is there any way I can help? Is there anything I can do? Right. And finding systemic ways to change the culture by being the change yourself.
No, and I think back to the first question. So if the supervisor is operating in an environment or being asked to do or told to do things that don't feel resonant, feel perhaps mightily in conflict with the way they would ultimately like to do it, that it causes a lot of strain and stress within, a person, I think, as well. And so I feel for all folks. I've been in all of those places. I've had terrible supervisors. I'm sure been a terrible supervisor. It is part of learning how to do this. I appreciate the sentiment. So thank you for that. This is another thing I've experienced. So how should I begin when the person I am supervising is reacting out of trauma when being coached individually or in response to my feedback? So that is hard. A lot of us come to this field. We have been through our own things. Maybe we're not through them. Maybe we haven't processed them or understood how, what you and I were talking about earlier, that if you can have that consistent feeling of who I am as a person and who I am, and having that centeredness in the work, if I'm kind of stuffing down everything I've ever been through, then I come to work, it's probably going to peak out. So how does one supervise folks that they either know or suspect are reacting from that kind of place?
We get better at thinking on our feet and responding in the moment when we practice it. It's just like anything else, right? So what we practice, the way we operate in our lives outside of work is how we'll tend to operate in our lives in the workplace. So in situations where we're confronted with something, I'm a martial artist, I do karate, and you know, when we're confronted with somebody who's being aggressive, aggressing right back at them never really works very well. It makes more aggression. That's not how we de-escalate conflict. So one of the ways that we de-escalate conflict is it only takes one person in a conflicted situation to de-escalate things. So if you can somehow be the person to de-escalate and to take a deep breath and even just acknowledge that, whoa, you know, that feels really big for me right now. I'm just going to take a breath here. Or maybe you need to disengage and say, oh, you know what, can I get back to you? And then go and scream in the bathroom or do whatever, you do some alternate nostril breathing, right? So whatever it takes for you to find that center and to find that true place in yourself, the more you practice that, the easier it's going to get. And that's great modeling to another person who's having a hard time regulating themselves.
And I think that's really tough. You know, we walk this fine line. We often get to know people and we don't perhaps want to hide everything we've ever been through or who or how we identify. And so sometimes we know things as a supervisor and we really want to be cautious too, making assumptions, you know, why and how, where people are reacting. It could be very clearly something that they've talked to you about. And, you know, I agree. I think that, you know, in the moment when that's happening is not the time maybe to ask, but I think if you're coming from that compassionate place and can say, you know, hey, I notice when we're talking about, I don't know, I'll just throw out paperwork. I don't know if that's ever a thing people talk about, but, you know, or, you know, struggling to get something done, you know, that this reaction really comes through. And is it feeling, you know, I've heard people talk about imposter syndrome. I've heard people feel like they, you know, could never be good enough. Gabor Mate is saying, was I good tonight? You know, we all have that appreciative of wanting to do well. And, you know, I'll just say, I think people, you don't know how hearing even constructive feedback comes across. And it can really be triggering, you know, so I think it's a sensitive line we're walking. And yet there's a job to do. So how do we navigate, you know, that and just be compassionate? And there are expectations, and that's part of, I think, having that relationship, as you sort of mentioned. It's really important, you know, not just talk about it when it's a problem, you know, also talk about it when it's maybe a better day to chat.
Well, sometimes we got to stand up and just be badass and say, you know what, I just don't agree with that. You know, and yeah. There's a risk, right? There's a risk. There's a risk that maybe that won't be taken well by other people. But the more we can come from this grounded place, and I can say, you know what, that's BS. And I can come from like a trauma place, or I can say, you know, I thought about that and it just doesn't feel right in me. And can we look at some different options for that? There's different ways of disagreeing. So the more we practice, the more skillful we get. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to a whole bunch of people here who do this on a daily basis. But sometimes when we're just reminded of the strengths that we have and the strengths we're already using, it just helps us feel more confident in being able to use those strengths.
You know, and I'll also say too, I think we often don't get trained before we are put in a supervisory role. We often don't get trained in how to best use supervision. And so I think it's a two-way street, and it takes that trust. It takes being clear about what supervision is. Are both parties, you know, or the team kind of clear on what that role really is, you know, and, you know, you're navigating a lot of relationships, especially if you're supervising more than one person. So appreciate the struggle and that you're trying to think about different ways to do it. Another question, you mentioned that facing fears creates insight. Do you have any suggestions for practices to help physically calm oneself when facing fearful or triggering scenarios? And I'm guessing that you do. based on what I know about you.
Yeah, the more we have a history of trauma, so Christina told you a little bit about my background. I was raised in a family where it was sexual abuse from as long as I can remember. And I left home when I was 13. I just like ran as far and fast as I could and lived on the streets for virtually all my teen years and experienced all kinds of trauma there. And, sexual trauma, human trafficking, in and out of foster care, just barely making it through school, and had so much love and support through a social worker, thank God, who was able to help me. But sort of lost my track here, but yeah, the more trauma that we've had, the more self-care we need. And I just acknowledge I need a lot of self-care. And for decades, I've been getting up every morning. And, I don't have children, so I do have the luxury of having my early mornings to myself. But like, honestly, I get up and I sit and, 20 minutes or whatever, I get up, I do Qigong, and then I do some stretching, and then I, just wiggle through the rest of my morning until I feel that sense of, okay, I feel ready to welcome my day. And so it's, I think that's the big thing, is the breathing and all the different ways that we can care for ourselves, doing things that we love. Deb Dana, who's one of the people with polyvagal theory I mentioned, she calls it looking for glimmers in our life, looking for those things that really give us joy. And when we do feel joy, when we do feel like a real connection and that whole beautiful feeling in us, to savor it. Yeah, savoring and basking in it. We're really used to basking in our trauma, and we watch the news and they're playing over and over and over again, like the horrible things that have happened, right? And we get so much exposure to that, so that we really need to consciously relearn how to bask in the joy and savor the beautiful things in our life. So if you're out today and you're walking and you see a beautiful bird or a tree or something, do your best to really take that in and savor that and remember that, and to kind of take a little snapshot of that, so that you can come back to that when you need to. There's one of the tools that I think is really useful.
Well, and I think you've said this already, I'm sure today, at least once, just noticing that's starting to happen. Like you're saying, what does it feel like to feel sort of the no, or what does it feel like when it's yes? And so I think, certainly encourage anyone to work with someone that, specifically sort of trained in sort of getting, if you're facing new things that you haven't faced before, or like you're saying, grounding yourself with the breathing. That always seems like you said, the back pocket, always a really helpful tool. So yeah, lots of opportunities there. Just want to acknowledge, thank you for people who have thrown in some stuff into the chat. The encouragement to be vulnerable, be okay with changing your mind and stumbling. Yeah, we discussed this earlier. It's a marathon. It's not something that you get because you got a title, that you suddenly have all the answers, and you'll have some answers, and then you'll learn most every day what you didn't know before. Right. And,
and we sprint too. So, I mean, it may be a marathon, life is marathon, but we sprint. And during our sprint, we still need to carry that awareness with us, right? Otherwise we are going to fall on our faces over and over, which is okay.
Yeah. And I like what someone wrote, taking the time to answer questions. Another good skill is just take a breath before you respond. As that's good for all around life decisions, like don't press send just this moment. Try not to press send, with your perhaps reactions, and knowing when you needed to take a little break yourself. Because sometimes the conversation and supervision can get really heated, or it's tapping into something you didn't realize you were going to be experiencing or feeling, and it's okay to say, can we come back to this one? Actually, I want to honor what we're trying to do here, but I feel like I'm needing just a little bit of a moment to get my perspective back. And
can I just say too, and the thank you.
Oh yeah.
Too. Like we're asking a lot of the people that we're working with, and to the thank you is always I'm sorry and thank you are two things that are really hard to say when we're in a leadership position, because we feel like we're maybe vulnerable, but in our vulnerability is our strength, right? So, geez, I'm sorry for that, and oh, thank you so much, right? Like don't forget, and I know you know this, but yeah, don't forget to say thank you lots and lots.
Yeah, I think just like all of us, I certainly have suffered this in the past, being so focused on the task at hand, the crisis of the moment, the list of things to do. And, it's sort of what's very comfortable place for me. It's not as comfortable for those around us. And we do have to sort of stop and tune in, and so I think when we're doing supervision, we don't know what the person we're supporting just experienced. We don't know what's going on in their life necessarily. It's not always that kind of relationship. We don't want what's going on in their life to overtake supervision either, because it is a job function we're trying to do as well. But I think, as you said, if we're both human, we're both going to falter, we're both going to need to be vulnerable. And, there is a container, it's a work setting, but I think, being attentive and being calm and being compassionate, being self-compassionate. I think you said this as well already, but having compassionate for learning how to do this supervision thing. That is not something you just, wake up born with. So really my heart goes out to everybody who's on either side of supervision, who's learning and trying to stay in it. It is really important. And as people said, it can make a really awful environment at times. It can really make some of the hardest places I've ever seen people work are places that people love to stay working because of that leadership, because of that culture that person brought. So please know that you're helping people come and stay in this field because of the way you're sharing your light and spirit with people.
It's another thing, Christina.
We could go on and on.
I know. Yeah. Well, we could. Since
we're riffing,
yeah. Well, I also just was remembering about playfulness, and playfulness comes from this connected place. It comes from a place of safety. It comes from a place of being connected, and playfulness, in a way, playfulness can also aggression can be masked as playfulness, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about playfulness that's loving, kind, and compassionate, and that honors our values and takes into account who's being impacted, and all of that playfulness that includes people, that brings people in, and that finds a way to lighten our load is also really important. So as leaders, if we can find a way to lighten our load and to lighten the loads of others, it just elevates the whole workplace and elevates everything around us. So that's another thing. Don't forget about being playful. Just have fun.
Yeah, there's lots of ways people can do things that are just sort of non-work related bonding things, potlucks, or let's all do the crossword each day together. I've seen so many various, ways of the Wordle. Yes, of course, it's got to be the Wordle now. No one has the paper. But yeah, and just sort of opening with, how are you doing, but meaning it, we know we're like, how you doing? Fine. That's not, nobody, this is perfunctory. You're just sort of saying that, but, thinking also of we each have our own supervisor as well. So even as supervisors, we have a supervisor, and maybe that hasn't been the best modeling. We don't know. We don't always know what we should know is effective. And I think seeking out leadership support, mentorship, ways to, just unload and get some insight that maybe isn't, going to come back on your performance evaluation. We're always mindful of who's in power, right? And I think that's something that we can never sort of underestimate, no matter how personable you might feel. As a supervisor, you have power. you may not feel very empowered, but you know, when you're meeting with that person, that could represent something. And so sort of thinking about someone's trying to make sure they're looking like they're doing a good job too, and you may have that need or want to have that appreciation. So I think that that's really important to sort of just remember, we're all humans, we're all in this job, we all have some level that we're related to. And so, you know, we're all in this trying to do this work. And so I appreciate everybody's, you know, being in this. You know, it takes a village, as they say.
It does.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing as we're trying to wrap up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll let you wrap up.
No.
Well, I think another good question to ourselves is, do I have something to prove when I come to work each day? Do I feel like I have something to prove? Do I feel like I have something to lose? And, you know, those two things can be interesting questions to ask ourselves too. Yeah, that's all. Something that sprung into my mind.
Yeah. You know, it takes time. It takes time to build trust with people you're supervising. You definitely are going to make mistakes. It's very good to acknowledge that, and you know, seem human. And yet, you know, there are boundaries and roles and all of that. But I think everything you've shared today has really helped people just try to just not be that reactive ball of nerve that we really can be. And we understand better, I think, through you why it does feel like that. Why we don't always recognize where the stuff is coming from.
We're working on it. We're all working on it. Yeah.
All working on it.
Thanks.
Well, I just want to thank you, Peyton, for getting all this stuff into the chat, and thank you everybody for your attention today. And you should be able to find all of Rebecca's past wonderful recordings and such there. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody.